This video may contain offensive language or be frightening to some viewers. Viewer discretion is recommended. She always liked to walk at night. Moving at the end of my high school year is not what I imagined. My mother and father insisted that we move a few towns away, far enough to escape the poor memories, yet close enough to the ones we wanted to keep. The town we reside in now has a decent enough track record, and the crime rate seems pretty low. My father has become so quiet now, so sallow, and I swear my mother's complexion will never come back. They walk around aimlessly, searching for my twin, my lovely sister, who perished in our old town, the victim of a gruesome murder, an unresolved one at that. At night, I like to stay up and listen to my parents reminisce over the beautiful moments they had with my sister. Tonight, the talk is a bit different. It is the 5-month anniversary of her death. These discussions always become intense. She was always a little crazy, you know? My mother's shaky voice trembles out the phrase, and I cannot believe what I am hearing. I know, dear, but she was our daughter. It could not be helped that she sometimes got things mixed up. I think it was a defense mechanism. The pale face of my father sinks even further back into his skull, and the sadness drips from his chin. How can my parents do this? How can they belittle my sister like that? I barge through the front door and make my way into the brisk night. The leaves of the trees fall, tickling my face as I dance through the cold black streets. Up ahead I see a dismal street lamp, and what appears to be a bench beneath it. A crusty-looking man is sitting on the bench, his head between his knees. I slowly approach the figure, calculating my steps as to not scare the poor fellow. Slowly, he lifts his head and stares directly at me. His look, if I can even call it that, is tortured. His yellowing eyes search my face and my body. The stubble on his chin moves as his jaw cracks in a nervous twitch. She always liked to walk at night. His voice is a stale mix of sawdust and cigarettes. The pitch rises, then falls as he stretches out the word night. His foul mouth twists into a beguiled smile, and his hands ball into fists. With a glimmer of hesitation, he rises from the bench, and I see a gleam coming from his pocket. A knife, I presume. I feel as though I should run, but something is cementing me to the ground at my feet. His black coat shuffles in the wind, and I catch a whiff of malt whiskey and smoke. What a poor man. He must not have a friend in the world. I begin to follow him, and he does not seem to mind my company. He does not once turn around to greet me, but simply walks. He keeps mumbling the phrase, "She always liked to walk at night." It started to drive me mad. Why do those words pierce my heart oh so much? I feel like I have heard them before tonight. He mumbles the words once more, and I shout, Who loved to walk at night? With a flick of his coat, the knife is in his palms, and I can feel it on my throat. His stale breath is making me ill, and his eyes burn holes into my skin. You did. For a moment, the realization sets in. Am I nothing more than a tormented ghost, reliving my death over and over again? No, that can't be. I break free from the man and rush back to the comfort of my home, my mum, my dad. But for some reason, they don't seem to notice me. Shadow creatures. Shadow people, also known as shadow men, shadow folk, or shadow beings, are said to be shadow-like creatures of supernatural origin, which appear as dark forms in the peripheries of people's vision and disintegrate or move between walls when noticed. Reports of shadow people are similar to ghost sightings, but differ in that shadow people are not reported as having human features, wearing modern period clothing, or attempting to communicate. Witnesses also do not report the same feelings of being in the presence of something that was once human. Some individuals have described being menaced, chased, or more rarely, attacked by shadow people. There have also been reports of shadow people appearing in front of witnesses or lingering for several seconds before disappearing. Witnesses report that encounters are typically accompanied by a feeling of dread. Most accounts of shadow people describe them as black humanoid silhouettes with no discernible mouths, noses, eyes, or any expression whatsoever, though purported witnesses have also described child-sized humanoids or shapeless masses. Some reports also include glowing red eyes. Generally, they are described as lacking mass, though their specific nature varies from a two-dimensional shadow to a vaporous or distorted three-dimensional form. Their movement is often described as being very quick and disjointed. They may first move slowly, as if they were passing through a heavy liquid, and then rapidly hop to another part of a witness's surroundings. Some witnesses describe this movement as though the shadow entities they have seen danced from one wall to the next, or as moving around the room as if they were on a specific track. Some accounts differ from above, and instead describe a completely black creature with red eyes, a cloak, and a gentleman's hat. This variation has become known as the Hat Man. Here is a story about such creatures. Those little flickers of darkness you see out of the corner of your eye, those aren't just spots, or dust, or a trick of the light. Maybe they're ghosts, as some people believe, but I'm convinced they're the shadow people. Beings from a dimension close to our own, but not able to be seen when we focus fully on them. I have always been able to see the shadow people. When I was young, my mother had my eyes checked by several different optometrists because I complained about the things I saw. I learned to keep quiet about them, but it took a while. My first encounter with them took place when I was 3 or 4 years old. I lived in a high-rise flat with a sweeping view of the hills and the city below us. My best friend at the time, Michelle, was over on a play date. Her family lived across the landing, and we spent more time together than apart. That day she greeted me by running into my room, fueled by a ridiculous burst of enthusiasm. "We have to play with my new dolls," she screeched at me. I was much more into dinosaurs and bugs, and that sounded like a terrible way to spend an afternoon. "No," I insisted. "We have to play imagination. Godzilla vs. the killer wasps." I tried to stomp around the room and look menacing. Michelle huffed and disappeared. She was much faster than I was, and I wasn't very good at finding hiding people. But for all that, I should have seen her when I turned the corner. And I didn't. Then I saw a shadow lurking at the corner of my vision. Thinking it must be Michelle, I turned towards it, calling her name. There was no answer, and the shadow continued to dance and dart out of range of my direct stare, as if it were avoiding making eye contact with me. As the years went by, I began to believe that the shadow people were my friends, or even my protectors, like guardian angels. But then the nights became terrifying. I started to see the shadow people in the real shadows of my room. Many of them darted away when I tried to stare at them, but others hung around in the corners, clustering like cobwebs. Then the noise started. It was like wind caressing leaves until they whispered. It was a language I couldn't comprehend, words I knew I would never understand unless I was somehow in their dimension. As the whispering grew more frenetic, the shadow people began to come together and move towards me. I bolted to my parents and shook them awake. Of course, they didn't believe me, trying to coax me into believing it was just a dream or my imagination. I know it was the shadow people, and if you see a shadow within the shadows, or a shape flitting at the edge of your vision, you may not be alone. I opened my eyes and screamed. His eyes were large and unblinking, and his smile was red. He had carved a smile into his face. His clothes were covered in blood, and then I passed out.